what time it is. Amateur and the coach. Amateur and the coach. And let me tell you again, we're talking about amateur and the coach.
How you doing? Another day. We're back at it here at the Amateur and the Coach. Today we have House Representative Daniel Pae. It's good to have you on. I'm happy you're here. Let me get this right before we get started, because I want everybody to know you are the youngest House Representative in the state of Oklahoma.
That's correct.
Okay, I want to make sure. I know that it's been thrown around. That's huge, man. That's big, especially if anybody knows a little bit of anything, at least in the politics of Oklahoma, in the past. I mean, you're breaking ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come on y'all's show.
Mm-hmm.
It's an honor to be with you and talk about kind of the responsibilities I have as a legislator and some of the things I have to do for the community. I think first, it's important to note that this is my hometown. I was born and raised here. That's what makes it so fun. Is by helping the Lawtonians in House District 62, they're my neighbors, my former teachers, folks that I grew up with, and that's what makes it so worthwhile. And it's a very non-traditional job. It's not. Right. I wouldn't say it's Monday through Friday 8 to 5. You're always on call, so to speak, for constituents who are emailing or calling me with requests and ideas for legislation. But I can definitely emphasize that I have strong roots in the community because I went through Lawton Public Schools. I graduated from Hubish, Tomlinson, and Lawton High. Oh. And then, so I'm a Wolverine, yeah. I went up to Norman for 4 years, University of Oklahoma. I'm a proud Sooner as well. And to be honest, I initially wanted to pursue a career in medicine. So I was pre-med freshman year, and it wasn't until I took a couple of government economics classes, I really felt passionate about those subject areas, and decided to switch majors. So ultimately graduated with double major in political science and economics, and a master's degree in public administration. Oh, okay. All within 4 years' time.
All within OU?
Mm-hmm. All within OU, and then got involved in OU student government. Decided to run for the position of student body president at the university. Got to serve in that for 1 year. Really proud that we got to open up a food bank to help a lot of low-income college students who have food insecurity challenges.
That saved my life, and I tell you, Cameron University has a great program right here at the Cameron. What is that? The Baptist. Not the Baptist.
Cameron Baptist Ministry.
Right.
Yeah. I know Edwin Muniz.
Right.
Yeah,
on
he
Wednesdays.
Helps with that. Yeah.
I mean, you get in there, get a free meal when you're in between classes. I mean, that saved my life as I was running in between classes, never having time. I mean, I give it up. I should have done more for them, and I'm glad that we're throwing them out there today.
But I did that, and then I also got to intern twice at the state capitol. That's where I got my foundation as far as knowing the legislative process. Also got to intern in Washington, D.C. for Congressman Cole. That was a lot of fun, just being at the federal level.
Well, just being at that level and being in Washington and just rubbing elbows with some major heads, that's big.
Absolutely.
Especially small town Lawton.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that I wanted to come back home after I graduated, because I knew a lot of my friends were leaving Lawton, they were leaving Oklahoma, and I wanted to do my part to try to reverse that statistic and that trend. So I found a part-time job initially with the city of Lawton in the city manager's office. And that's why I saw myself working for the long term with maybe city government at the local level. And then, as life often happens, an unexpected opportunity popped up with this House seat becoming open in the 2018 election cycle, because the incumbent was going to run for the state Senate seat in our area. He's one who I interned for at the state capitol in Oklahoma City. And so I decided to take the plunge after a lot of prayer and consultation with my mom and dad. I just felt that we needed young people involved in the political process. Had some folks, some skeptics, who said that you're too young, you're too inexperienced. But I decided it's important for people in our generation to see people like them in elected office, and that's what motivated me every day during the campaign. And I knocked on over 12,000 doors by the end of the campaign. Met a lot of incredible people, and that paid off in the end because I won by a margin of 42 votes.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
It was a very close election.
Larry Bush.
Yes.
Yes, I seen that. It was a real close election. And one thing I did like about that, regardless if Larry Bush would have won or yourself, is that me being a minority, I was happy that there was two minorities running and they were the candidates that were going to win. And I know that I don't want to say that I'm siding one way or the other, or it's not about that, but it does make me proud because we are a small percentage of people who actually get involved, minorities get involved in politics. Especially another low statistic is, like you just mentioned earlier, young people in politics. I mean, here in this last, was it February up to May, for the last elections, we had an actual poll for a political science class. And we could clearly see, once we did the statistical analysis, that a majority of the people who were coming in to vote were 40 and up, 50 and up, retired, veterans, very low majority of young people from 21 and below or 21 above to 27. I mean, it's just a real low margin. So when you say things like that and you touch that, how important it is that you are the youngest House representative in the state of Oklahoma, I just want to make sure that our audience knows and that we know that is huge.
Yeah.
That is actually breaking down walls, you know, because some people you can say it's always been old politics.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed working with my more senior colleagues. I think a lot of them treat me affectionately as their grandson.
Right.
So I've gotten a lot of great financial advice, dating advice, you name it. So it's been fun building coalitions like that.
Yeah, my first question was going to be, what's Doug Coe like? But I'm just joking.
Yeah, and I've helped a lot of them as far as social media stuff, because they see my Facebook page. I'm sure you guys have
technology
as well.
changing.
Yeah, and I post constantly, and then when they're like, what, do you have a consultant? Do you pay for that? I'm like, I do it myself. All the captions, all the pictures, that's all on me. So
yeah, you're revolutionizing their ideas in the way. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm
And that's
happy to
probably
help
something
them.
they I don't think they even realize that they should be utilizing is this knowledge base of how the generation is changing. Wow, and that that changes your abilities to run. You know?
Well, we got such a diverse community here in terms of because of our relationship with Fort Sill. A lot of veterans here in the community. We have, when it comes to geographics or socioeconomics or just politics, it's very diverse. It's across the board, and I think that's a good type of district to represent because you have to listen to everyone and kind of hear their perspectives and try to forge consensus. You not make everyone happy by any means, and that's part of being a good leader, is by trying to listen and also acknowledge that because of the sheer differences, you're not always going to be on the same page. But as long as you have the big picture in mind of where we're going and how we can get there in a positive way, in a productive way, that's what matters.
Right. Do you find yourself as a politician hard not to satisfy everyone?
Well, I learned that when I served as OU SGA president, that you're not going to make everyone happy, and it's an impossible objective to have. Ultimately, I think what matters is just being accessible and approachable, is trying to include everyone in the process. That's why this year alone I had about 7 town halls when I was back in the district, just so that anyone and everyone could come and ask me questions, express their approval or disapproval about the job I was doing, and that way I could become a better representative. And I just got back from Arkansas. I was there for a few days for a leadership conference. I got to meet other freshman legislators from across the southern states, and we got to talk about some of the best practices when it comes to legislating. And so that's what we try to do in the interim period when we're not in session, because Oklahoma has a part-time legislature. We're only officially in session up there at the Capitol February through May, and then any other time we're supposed to be back home in our districts.
But networking is critical during
absolutely,
that time.
And other folks, especially the more senior folks, they have to go back to their prior occupation, whether that's a lawyer or they're self-employed or real estate. But me, because I'm young and I'm single, I can focus exclusively on legislative stuff.
Well, if they knew how to do the media stuff, the way that you've utilized it, they would be able to network during that time as well.
Yeah,
And times
that's what a lot of folks have told me, is that they appreciate my all the above strategy when it comes to outreach. It's not just Facebook. I'm also utilizing newspaper with Law and Constitution, KSWO, television interviews,
podcasting,
radio, and then I also send during session. I send out weekly email updates. I have an email list of constituents, and even during the interim period, I try to send updates every now and then. So that no matter how you get your news, there should be no excuse if you live in my district that you should be aware of what's going on at the Capitol.
Yeah, and a lot of those key supporters, part of the reward system is just part of that outreach and being accessible, listening to their concerns and considering them. That's really what they want in a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's super important.
Especially in a legislator, right?
Oh yeah,
you got to consider what we're mandating and
and then sometimes you don't hear from your elected official until there's the next election coming up, and that's usually just like you get something in the mail. And I did not want to be that type of politician. I wanted to be someone who, if you had a question, that you could feel comfortable reaching out to me. If you wanted to do an interview, you could feel like you can give me a call or send me a message.
Right.
And then I could get back, So
no,
that's how this
and I
worked out.
commend you because you are very approachable and very reachable. So
thank you.
Just to express that to the public and your constituents that if they do have a need or something they need to speak to you about, you've been more than helpful to be reached.
And that's the critical issue for the youth, people under 40, because they're all disillusioned. In order to see someone as other than just a politician, it's the outreach part is critical, and that's a full-time job.
Yeah, trying to
that's
change
that's
lives.
what kind of makes you a little different,
So to just as long as you're representing District 62, which is Comanche County, you also have legislative committees that you're on. You're on the County Municipal Government Committee. You're a member of that. Your Government Efficiency Committee, you're vice chair on that. You're also Subcommittee on Human Services member on that. And you're Veterans and Military Affairs Committee member on that. How do you find the time, Daniel?
It was definitely it was definitely a very hectic transition. A year ago after the election, you only have a few weeks to specialize in these areas, read the bills, and figure out how you're going to vote. And so it was definitely a very busy time. But in contrast, the past few months have been a blessing because there's been a lot more flexibility. And we have the opportunity in the interim to do studies, to dive deeply into certain policy areas, to do more research, figure out what possible ideas there are for legislation. And so I did 2 interim studies, one focused on solar energy, how we can become a top 10 state in that area, and then the other on criminal justice reform, looking at how do we help the children who have incarcerated caregivers. And there are over 90 studies that were approved, so between now and Thanksgiving you'll have additional meetings taking place on all sorts of subjects. So I definitely think the interim period helps us take a deep breath and kind of look at it from a holistic perspective. During session, the 4 months that we're up there, it's definitely a very busy time, which is why I personally always like seeing folks from Lawton come up to visit and learn more about the process, because that's a nice way to remember why I'm up there in the first place. It's for the folks down here. It's not for the title, not for any
We would sure love the tour.
Yeah.
We would sure love to be up there.
Yeah, I would not go out there the next few weeks because they're going through a lot of construction on the house side. Come January, a lot of that should be completed. So there'll be more of the Capitol to see at that
Great.
point.
Maybe next time we have our interview, we can have it actually in your office.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't have an office
Give
right
you
now.
the home court advantage.
Yeah.
And you can get a lot done without an office.
Right.
Yeah.
So piggybacking off what you just said, we also read up on that. You're a big supporter of education. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a product of the public school system, a lot of public schools, and I had the chance a couple years ago to work for them part-time with the Student Investment Program initiative that they passed on the ballot. I was in charge of the social media campaign of spreading the message and information about that particular school bond. It was the largest school bond in our community's history. I'm glad it passed because we're going to get a new middle school. We're going to get a lot more technology and resources to students and teachers.
Right.
So that gave me an in-depth look about the needs of this particular school district. And another thing I've done in the interim period is volunteer as a substitute teacher. I'll continue to do that as much as possible before we go back in February. But I've seen what it's like to be a substitute teacher when it comes to elementary, middle, and at the high school level. And that's helped me better understand a lot of the challenges that teachers have, when it comes to what goes on in the classroom and how they have to have multiple hats on, not just a teacher,
Correct.
but in some cases they have to be a parent, they have to be a therapist.
Correct.
They have a whole lot of responsibilities
It's a
in
weird
addition to
job.
teaching. Yeah. So that's why, to me, education is not a Republican or a Democratic issue because it affects the future of our kids and the next generation, and we got to make sure that they're successful. So I'm really proud that this year, while we were in session, we passed the largest education budget in our state's history. There was about $157.7 million directly appropriated to classroom funding, and that'll help give our teachers the tools they need to be successful. Not to mention, we gave them an additional teacher pay raise of $1,200, which is on top of last year's pay raise, which is on average about $6,000. And we're now at the regional, as far as the regional average, with the highest in our part of the country.
That's great.
So it's a great turnaround from the past few years where
Yeah.
we've been very low when it comes to education investment.
There was a
But,
lot of unrest about that.
yeah, well, and the voters made their voices heard last
sure did.
cycle. There were a lot of incumbents who were not very supportive of education. They're no longer in the legislature. And I think that's changed the tone and the demeanor of how things get conducted. This is probably one of the most productive sessions we've had. There are over 46 freshmen in the House alone. That's pretty much the majority right there.
Oh, wow.
And we were able to change the culture and change the dynamics of the legislative process.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty awesome.
Interesting.
That says a lot about Oklahoma,
Right.
the direction of Oklahoma and where
Yep.
it's going.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't understand that, and maybe don't know. I wouldn't say understand it, but I maybe don't know that, a long time ago Oklahoma was Democrat, and they moved to Republican, and it's been Republican.
Yep. And we also had some socialist roots in this
We
state.
have some socialist roots.
Mhm.
There's a lot of socialist movements that come here.
Yeah.
So just to see that Oklahoma might be taking a different direction, or not even maybe a different direction, but just broadening their ideas, which is huge for Oklahoma. Not only for our children, but for the future, economically, socially. And you're on the head, one of the forefront runners of doing this. And that's just, it's commendable. It really is. I think that you're doing a great job in
Thank
that
you.
aspect. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Now that we got all that out of the way, your parents are small business owners. What kind of business they have? What was the deal?
Well, they immigrated from South Korea in 1983, and they, at the time, and still do, own a dry cleaning business right outside of Fort Sill. So I got to be a lot of soldiers.
Did you
as
work
a
there
kid.
too?
I helped them out as a kid. Got to greet the soldiers who came in and help organize the clothing. I think that's a testament to the American dream in this country.
So,
I think they're a great example of that.
Because I come from, my family also came from Mexico, and when they got here, they faced challenges, especially uncles and aunts of mine who were trying to start small businesses with their language barrier. Did your parents also face that when they got here?
Yeah, they didn't speak English when they got here, and so they had to self-learn, educate themselves.
I used to translate all the time. I mean, it was my job. That was like basically my job as an 11-year-old, 10-year-old to be translating. Are these similarities that you had to do to help your parents, succeed in their business?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an important part of that, is trying to help them, which now they're satisfactory when it comes to language,
Right.
And they're able to help the customers out, stop by the cleaners. I think my dad's he's a pretty good businessman.
Right.
The way that he can be very persuasive. Makes a good deal.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, I think they flourished and been successful since they came here.
Well, they're really giving to the community. They've been here over 20 years.
Yep,
you know.
30 years. Well,
Yeah,
because
right.
they started Queens in 1989.
Right.
About
So
30
it's,
years.
I mean, that they've been part of the community, huge part of
Yep.
the community, huge part of Fort Sill, and you know, you have been there since the beginning.
Yeah, and I met some folks knocking on doors who knew my mom and dad because I asked for my last name. They're like, you guys are the ones with the cleaners on Sheridan Road? I was like, yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah.
That even helped you break doors down.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's
Oh, wow,
yeah.
yeah. To really make that connection with the community, because I mean, I've used it myself, and I never once put the connection together until now. That oh, okay, wow, all right. Did now you being your parents being from South Korea and you being a minority yourself, as you started, you know, living here in Lawton and going into, you know, college and whatnot, did you find that, you know, you're facing some, you know, adversity because of being Asian in a place or in a community where it's, you know, probably African American, Caucasians, a very small Asian community? And for when I heard that you became House Representative of Comanche County, and then I heard, well, he also has Asian descent, I'm thinking, wow, what, he must be great. I mean, because I know how hard it is already in politics, and I'm saying this by statistics, that what you also did besides getting in there as a minority, breaking that, and not only as a minority, but an Asian minority, you know, a South Korean Asian minority, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's very similar to what happened at OU because, you know, I was the first Korean American to be elected to that position. And throughout my life, I was kind of focused on working hard and doing my best and just being nice to people and treating them the way that I want to be treated, the golden rule.
Correct.
And I think that's what's contributed to my successes. And as far as your question about any adversities or challenges that I faced personally, I can definitely say that I've met some folks who were prejudiced and racist against me, but I didn't let them ultimately get the best of me because I wanted to ignore them and just prove them wrong and show that I can be successful, my family can be successful. And I tell young people all the time, just ignore the haters. They're always going to be there, try to bring you down. The best thing to do is just move forward with confidence and try to just be the best person you can be. And that's what I've done my whole life.
Because I have my daughters also in the you know, in the education, the public system, the school system here, and you know, the bullying thing in schools, in middle schools, and high schools, and even into the level of elementary, and how prominent it is in certain schools and certain more than others.
Yeah.
To the point that you feel like you need to shift your child around or homeschool them, or so this is what I was talking to you earlier about. Trying to have some kind of jiu-jitsu program that kind of anti-bullying, and I know that you're huge on education. We just went over that, but also, I mean, what is your ideas on bullying and what's happening?
Well, I can tell you that I had a tough time transitioning between elementary and middle school. I was picked on and bullied myself. I'm not as athletic as you are, and so
thanks. I appreciate it, Daniel. I try to work on it.
So you know, PE wasn't my at the top of my list of favorite classes to go to, and so. But in retrospect, I actually am thankful for going through that experience because it helped me become a stronger person, going through that adversity. And I actually ran a piece of legislation this past session dealing with bullying and trying to change our state's definition to match the CDC national definition. And the main difference is that with the CDC definition, it includes, in addition to a pattern of aggressive behavior toward another student, it also includes any incidents that could lead to a pattern of ongoing aggressive behavior, just to make sure we include any incidents that are really adverse toward another student and that could lead to the possibility of something even more dangerous. So that's what the bill did. It got through committee, but like many other bills, it got stuck at that part of the process.
The gears.
And so hopefully we can reconsider it next year. But that's definitely something that I want to try to pursue.
I think that's great. I think you're on the right path with that, because Oklahoma, it's starting. It does have a problem with that, and I don't know if it's a lack of education, a lack of awareness. I still haven't figured it out. I have a 13-year-old, so I'm very involved in her and her education.
Yeah.
So I do see these things, and I don't know if it's the parents or if it's the child or if it's just. It's hard to keep up with the new generation's norms. Or trying to adapt to the norms. It's very quickly shifting.
Yeah, well, in this generation in particular, when we were in school, we didn't have social media to the extent that we have now.
Right.
And cyberbullying has taken off, and that'll be a question that we have to grapple with as a society. Is when it comes to cyberbullying, how do you, if at all, intervene in that?
Well, and it's funny you say, because my ideas when it comes to cyberbullying, I have had, I put some very thought into it, that I kind of compare it to the arguments when the tobacco companies were putting cartoons on their labeling. Well, I feel like some of these media sites do the same thing. They promote youth to come on there, and then they promote the types of communication, the types of ideas that are being shared between them that can be harmful. But they keep adding to it with more colors, with more apps that are just so. In that way, I say there's a correlation in my own opinion, that the advertising on some of these social platforms are being targeted towards children, and I feel like social platforms, some of them, because of the content that's allowed on them social platforms, are for adults.
Well, I mean, adults, I think they set a bad example, because if you look at any Facebook comment section, these are grown adults who they are bickering and saying horrible things to each other, and the kids are watching it.
Correct.
And I mean, they're setting a bad precedent as far as how to engage with each other in a discussion. Because that's why I prefer in-person discussions and conversations, because it's harder to say something mean to another person if you're looking at them directly, versus if you're just typing it on a keyboard on your smartphone. So I think that's why I don't really engage in terms of Facebook comments, because it's a black hole in my opinion. There's no winning, because the other person, they don't want to. They want to beat you, and they don't want to learn from you. So it's a waste of time, and I tell my friends all the time to just don't try to engage with
echo chambers.
And a lot of trolls, and don't engage with them. That's what they want ultimately, is to kind of pull you down to their level.
Right. And also, I know that you mentioned the relationship that we have with Fort Sill, and I don't know with it, how can I even ask you this question? Would be more of, as you've noticed here in Lawton, the new springing up of dispensaries. And Fort Sill being a federal base. So I feel like because of the amount of dispensaries that are coming out, that it's changing the persona or the outlook of what Lawton maybe used to stand for, and now getting more of a sense of they're really loose down there in Lawton, and having a base so close to Lawton, and trying to say we don't stand for that. How do you keep that bridge together?
Well, as far as the dispensaries, it's not just here in Lawton, but it's across the entire state. I mean, there are billboards along the highways you go to advertising the dispensaries. And what concerns me about the sharp increase in the number of them is, for example, we had one bowling alley that closed in order to become a dispensary for medical marijuana. So you have these places where kids can go to have a good time and hang out with their friends now disappearing, and they have nothing to do in this community. And that contributes to, I think, something we need to address as far as getting more quality of life initiatives here in town, so we can keep young people here after they graduate from high school and college. But as far as a relationship with Fort Sill, we've had some times in the past where, because of the base realignment closure cycles, there was a possibility that we could lose Fort Sill. But I think since we have strong federal representatives and senators, I don't see Fort Sill going anywhere. And with the dispensary thing, I don't think that'll impact it, because if you look at the cumulative relationship we have with Fort Sill, it's very strong. You have a lot of good connections with the Lawton community, and I don't really see that being weakened in any way based on this latest development. And if you look at the pure economics, I think there's no way that all these dispensaries will be sustainable over the next few decades. Some, if not most of them, will have to close down.
What I'm saying.
It is already saturated,
Right,
so that they will not be here for the long term.
Sure.
So I'm going to cut in, and because we don't have video, so I can do this openly now.
So you want me to look at you? Or
It's
right,
whatever.
okay.
So
we don't have any video at all.
I used to
Okay.
run a gaming lounge in Lawton off Sheridan called Omega Tech Gaming. We ran for about 2 years. And we got to a point where we wanted to branch out to the City of Lawton Chamber of Commerce. We sent in everything. What we got back was like a 3-page thing, and we graded it for spelling. And oh my God, it wouldn't pass. It got an F. There was different formatting. So we refused Lawton before they could refuse us based on the standing. And so that combination of small business, of technology, of youth interest, because that's what we were, to bring a community together. We stopped ourselves from growing because how hard it was to communicate with Lawton. And that was so crazy for us to go through.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's closed now. Me and my wife joke around saying the For Lease is the best business in Lawton. There's tons of them. You know.
So how was your? So you are also went to Lawton High, right? You are a Wolverine.
Onto you.
Right. How was your experiences through high school? I mean, because we have Wolverine here, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my wife was a Wolverine,
Yeah.
so we have a bunch of Wolverines. So you know, how are you helping Lawton High in any way? Are you because you are an alumni from Lawton High? Are you doing anything for the high school?
Yeah, well, I got the opportunity to help them out the first day of classes back in August and help check the students and help the freshmen find their lockers. And
Okay.
being older, you can tell who the freshmen are because they
Right.
look a little nervous and
Yeah, my
I'm not
daughter's
sure.
going to high school next year. She's a freshman.
Yeah, and I remember
So,
being in their
yeah.
shoes, and so I wanted to help them out that particular time since the beginning of the school year.
Hang out, Jordy.
And
I want to further address this point.
yeah,
So I just that's what I feel like that's something that high schools are lacking. Like a lot of people who go to high schools and they go off to do something great or they're changing the community or somehow they hardly ever come back.
yeah.
And try to be like, hey, you know, this is how you're going about. I understand. I was here.
Well, listen, man.
You know.
High school is an awkward time for most people, and
we got puberty happening.
usually,
Yeah.
usually there's a lot of mixed emotions regarding that place that people have. I still have nightmares that I forgot to do this final, and I need to go back to class and do this thing real quick before I can get out of here.
Yeah.
So somebody like me is not gonna show up at the high school reunion, etc. You know what I'm saying?
right.
And I cannot blame other people who might feel the
Sure.
same way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I just find it important that you
Yeah.
take some time out.
Well, I still keep in touch with a few of my teachers from Lawton.
Mhm.
One in particular, Dr. Freeman. He teaches English there.
I can see where you might be cool with that guy.
Yeah, he taught at West Point for a number of years before he came to
okay.
Lawton. So it's basically taking a drill sergeant as your instructor for
Right,
English.
right.
So you learn a lot.
Learn grammar.
Well, he sometimes randomly took someone's essay and read it out loud and critiqued it to everyone.
That's always tough.
Well, that's how you become a better
Right,
writer
right.
by going through that process.
Selective pressure.
Yeah, and not to mention public speaking. He really emphasized public speaking, so we got
Yeah.
to stand up in front of the class and recite poetry and whatnot.
And that's something that I wish they would push more in
Mhm.
high school, or at least in middle school, because especially in this generation, it's so easy to text
Mhm.
that it's harder
Yeah.
and especially when I was in class here at Cameron, and we would have to do some type of presentation,
Mhm.
some type of communication with each other. They just can't communicate.
Yeah.
They don't know how to be. They're socially awkward.
Yeah. Or they have very short attention spans because
Right.
of being on Facebook so often. They want something instantaneously. It's hard to sit down and read a book or concentrate on having a long-term conversation.
What do you think in terms of bullying and just the social norm, the new social norms?
Mhm.
Like my children are younger than my brother-in-law's here, so I don't have to worry about this yet. But like, what are the social repercussions of not using social media in junior high and high school?
Yeah.
Because it is, I don't use it now.
Yeah.
I think it is bullshit.
Yeah. There's a good book called Digital Minimalism. Highly recommend to you and to your viewers.
Okay.
It talks about, as a society, how we become addicted to smartphones and social media.
Right.
And they have some strategies of where you don't have to totally isolate yourself, be off the grid, but you can try to control how often you're using Facebook and Twitter and how often you're on those types of sites while still having them. There's a way to have a good balance.
Right.
And that's what the book talks about. And I try to, avoid being on my phone whenever I'm at the dinner table or with my friends hanging out. I try to be in the moment because I think sometimes we just more focused on what's in our news feed than what's right in front of us.
Right.
It kind of helps you detach from, I guess, your reality for a second there, to kind of live somebody else's life for a second and see what they're going through for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the gist of it, but I find it more damaged than anything.
Yeah. Well, then some people, like, they look through their Facebook page and they see friends, on vacation and doing all sorts of things, and then you kind of think about yourself, like, what am I doing? And you ask yourself that question, then. That's talking about the damages of social media. That's one thing of that. You're comparing yourself to others all the time, and that's not a healthy thing to do.
I'm just thinking about how easily accessible it is now. It's in the 80s, people did bumps of cocaine, and now you just take out the phone and click on your Twitter app, and I got some likes, and hey, I saw somebody twerking, and you could be improving your life. You could be a student, or you could be successful on social media, so to speak. I don't know how to say that in a proper way.
Right.
But you really can't do both. It takes an amount. It's a time sink that is serious enough that it will really damage, like you were saying, your ability to spell, or just speak and
have a conversation.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Huh. So, that's weird and Orwellian to me. But I wonder what are the successful peer pressure elements that are causing people to say, well, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Well,
for me
the
to
people
waste
don't want to
my
be left out. They don't want to be left behind. All the other friends have some sort of social media account, and they want to be with it. Yeah. It's like
stimulation. I keep saying how important that is, especially in society. And this is why it's important to follow and highlight people like yourself, because if we can start a trend of someone saying, I'm going to follow you, I like how you move, I like what you're doing, and start having ideas that you have and share it. And and I know it's reaching out a lot and maybe being too hopeful in some ways, but I think that more of that type of medicine is what's needed. Especially Lawton, because man, sometimes I get sad because when people talk of Lawton, and I see the social medias and like
the grapevine.
I don't mention that name not to be mentioned on this podcast.
Sorry.
We'll get to that off the air.
All right.
Yeah, that is there, not to be mentioned here. I'm sorry, I should have told you at the beginning.
A lot of beef.
But anyways, but those types of platforms, and it's just a lot of people are like disgust and negative talks and how they view it and what they think of it. And I know that I try to separate myself and say, well, maybe that's the type of life they're living here, because with good there's also bad, and I get that. But I hardly ever hear a lot of praise for Lawton. And this is a trend that I'm trying to change, that Lawton is a good place to raise your children at. It's a good place to set roots. There's a lot of good people here. It's got super much potential. And I feel like it takes people like you and Di and other individuals, my brother-in-law, Jordy, to stay here in Lawton and actually make a difference. And I feel like that message is lost somewhere. So how are you battling this? How are you actually trying to make people stay here? To actually say, hey, I got a plan. Wait a minute, just give me a second. Because before you actually came on and sat down, I can't really honestly say I paid the time or say, hey, I'm going to get to know who my representative is. If it wasn't for my eagerness to know you, to have you on here, maybe I would have been pushed to do it. And I know that I'm one of 100,000. So how are you breaking that? How are you getting through to people?
earlier in the week, I got a chance to speak at the high school senior conference. They brought together all the high school seniors in the area. And my particular group was on civic participation. So I asked the students, how many of you plan on staying in Lawton? And the responses were discouraging because a lot of them were wanting to get out as soon as possible.
It's not a cool response to say, I'm going to be a townie.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick around.
Exactly.
I'm going to go to Cameron University. And you know.
Yeah, so I mean, what you just said is very much true in the young folks in our community. And what I've tried to do, along with a few other folks, is there's something called Young Professionals a lot. And people 18 to 40 years old, young professionals, we're trying to change the perception of the community so that people our age want to stay here and try to invest in the town. And we do community service events like cleaning up a creek. We have mentorship events. We have established community leaders come and talk to us about what it takes to be successful and give leadership advice. And we have networking events so that people like us can know that there are other people like us, our age, in Lawton, and that we can become friends and co-workers and what have you. So it's a great organization that's really taken off in just 2 years' time. And another group is called Lawton Proud, and their whole mission is try to highlight what is the good that is happening in our community, whether it's events on weekends. So they have weekly updates or bi-weekly updates rather, showing what to do with your family and your friends.
Do you see a big following growing?
I do, yeah. There's a lot more followers, a lot more folks interested in what goes on with Lawton Proud. They publish articles from community leaders. I've done that, asking why are you Lawton Proud.
Correct.
And there is a story to be had when it comes to Lawton.
For sure.
With Fort Sill, with our manufacturing base here.
Or just with change of racial tensions.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a long history of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's Dodo Park.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know the history of that how much Lawton has actually changed.
I believe it is Bridge Park now. So.
Right.
Bridgeport, that's right.
Yeah. Bridgeport. Yeah.
Yeah.
The history of Bridgeport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so sometimes we can be our own
Also
worst
known.
enemy because we have, the nickname Shady 580.
Shady 580.
And a lot of
There
folks,
it is.
a lot of folks in
Representative
Lawton,
threw it down today.
Well, a lot of folks in Lawton say that, and
They do.
we're hurting
They do.
ourselves.
It hurts me.
Well, and I don't know if you guys know Jeff Elbert. He's part of the Great 580 initiative. And I really appreciate his passion for trying to focus on the good in Lawton.
Right.
We need more of that. We can't anything in life. If you tell yourself you can't do something, you're terrible. You're not going to be successful. You got to make sure you're self-confident and you're proud of who you are, where you're from.
And
that's what we got.
I believe that 100%. I think that also helps the economics because the better the name or the better the reputation the town may have, well, of course, there's going to be more economic opportunities as big corporations, businesses starting up, people wanting to invest in a good town. So I feel when people do have that stigma, it hurts us in so many levels. So I'm all for it. What you said, I'm 100%. The amateur and the coach is to improve Lawton, to change that outlook that people have as Shady 580, and letting people know that here in the state of Oklahoma, Lawton's a great place to raise your family and a good place to be and a great education. So yeah, I really commend you on that drive. I think
And Oklahoma at large is a great state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I especially when they're, I see it hopeful because if you got in there, that only opens the door for somebody else, your age, or with your background, or just that new blood. And I think that they realize that there's benefits from that. And this is comes full circle on what we had talked about earlier before the show, is that have you found any difficulties because how historically in Oklahoma politics it's been white people, and now that you're in there and you're in the party and you're in the dance, do you find it difficult to get things done? Do you find it difficult to be accepted? How is that working for you?
I think there were other folks who came before me who paved the way. Specifically in our area, we had T.W. Shannon, who was a representative in this district, also very young in his 20s, first African American to be elected Oklahoma House Speaker. And after him was John Mark Montgomery, also in his 20s. And there's a lot of precedent in our community for wanting young leadership. And so Lawton has always sent up young leaders to the Capitol. And I think they've helped pave the way in terms of demonstrating young leaders are effective and we can make change happen. So I haven't gotten a lot of pushback because of my age during the past year that I've served. And I've actually been pretty productive as a freshman because I had the advantage coming in knowing the process ahead of time. I could focus on building relationships across party lines and across the chambers between the House and the Senate. So I got about 4 bills across the finish line to get to the governor's desk. If you're a freshman, you're lucky if you get 1 or 2.
Right.
I contribute that to the relationship I have with my colleagues and the trust in supporting me and my leadership. So I'm hopeful that we have more young leaders elected to office. And I'm going to do my part by being a mentor. There's a great opportunity for high school students. They want to come to the Capitol. There's a PAGE program where for 1 week, all expenses paid as far as hotel and meals. You can be at the Capitol, learn the legislative process, and also go through a mock legislative simulation. So I've sponsored 3 high school students from Lawton High this past session. I'm going to probably post something here in a little bit about next year's PAGE program and get some good applicants to come from Lawton. But things like that where you try to be a mentor and encourage younger folks who are interested in public service that it's possible. You don't have to wait 20, 30 years.
Right.
If you want to serve, you can do that immediately after you complete your education.
That's a great program.
Mm-hmm.
Man, if I could applaud and mess up the audio, I would. That's a great program. That's really making changes.
Yeah.
Because so at times my daughter herself had made things like, man, I might like running for mayor, and she might say it jokingly, but those are the seeds that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that I like for her to say.
Yeah.
So when you mention that there's actually programs like that,
Mm-hmm.
That motivates me to say, hey, if that's the route you want to take, let's try this out. There's a program here. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So you were switching from the medical program.
Yeah, I was
At
pre-med and
OU,
then went to
and then something
public
happened.
policy. Yeah.
Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Yeah.
So it had to have been something economic, right?
Economics and then
You stumbled across something you didn't like, some misallocation of funding.
yeah, well, just and still to this day, kind of the tone of our politics these days nationwide. The fact that I think the statistic is 1 in 6 family members no longer speak to each other because of the political differences.
Yeah.
And that was pathetic. Like, because you have disagreements on policy or politics doesn't mean you have to hate the other person. And I'm concerned that we're becoming so polarized as a country where even something basic as passing a budget at the federal level is impossible now. And to me, governing is like riding a bike. When you ride a bike, you can't lean too far to the left or too far to the right. You have to be balanced. And I always think of a good idea as a good idea. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian.
Right.
We need to have a conversation, sit down, and try to work together. In any other area of business, you have to work with your colleagues. But in politics, for some reason, if you don't like the other person, you can sabotage them and play games and shenanigans and be dirty. And that's what I didn't like what I saw in politics. I wanted to offer something different because I know most people are sick and tired of the polarized state of our country right now.
So even with the fresh field, as fresh as I can in recent memory,
The most in the state's history, yeah.
ever. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I stand corrected.
Wow. And
How hard is it to not play the old way when it comes to cooperation on both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, and for some reason that's portrayed as weakness. Like if you want to work together, you're weak, and I think that's stupid because then you're making government more dysfunctional, and you're hurting society and the country as a whole in our state. So I think there are a lot of folks who got elected who are more practical and who like to focus on good policy outcomes. And that's been refreshing. There are more people who think like me at the Capitol now more than ever. And that's because of the voters. They voted out a lot of the ideologues who they like to grandstand and give wonderful speeches, but not actually govern.
Well, they punched and kicked. I want to say every single county went to Donald Trump.
Oh, is that right?
I want to say
In Oklahoma?
in Oklahoma.
Yes, I believe that's
So
right.
that's a red rebellion. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's weird.
Yeah, but I think last cycle you had education being at the forefront, and people were just frustrated that the legislature hadn't got anything done
Correct.
in so many years. They wanted a clean slate of elected officials to try to do something different. And you're right, a lot of that took place in the primary and the runoff stages. It didn't happen at the general election stage.
Right.
So that's what was interesting.
A question that I do have to ask while I have you here, and this is something that is usually like talked in social tables, and it's always something that just Oklahomans have their number one complaint about it that I've known about.
Oh, dear.
And now that I have you here is, and I don't know if it's a myth or maybe we just don't know enough about it. Turnpikes, toll booths, and turnpikes.
Oh dear. Okay.
Now, my wife has to work in Oklahoma City, so she has got to commute, and that's basically almost $8 to commute.
Sure.
Now, like I said, I haven't done my research or my history on it, but weren't the turnpikes supposed to be paid off after a certain limit? And after that term was done paying off, that somehow that was going to be shifted or allocated to somewhere else, or the responsibility to pay off the turnpike was not going to be on the taxpayer anymore. So what's going on there with that? Are we still paying on that? Is it paid off, or how does that apply? Or how's I know that all that is used for to rebuild roads, or I don't know where all the money's being funded to, but that's usually a huge question when we sit around and just common folk talking about the agitations of Oklahoma, and the turnpikes is one of them. So what can you say on that? Can you touch anything on that?
Well, I've had a chance to work with Tim Gatz, who is in charge of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, and it's a very nuanced structure that they have. As far as the funding, I think he can go into more details about that.
Okay.
But they are, in my opinion, using it prudently because there is ongoing renovation and construction on the turnpike system. And I think there definitely can be more transparency as far as how they're funded and what the type of structure is. Because I would consider it a quasi-public-private structure. It's a little bit of both.
Well, it's pretty frustrating because there's no communication between the public and, like you mentioned, I mean, there's no transparency. So to us, or I wouldn't say to us, but to the taxpayer, I get the feeling that they're saying that we can't see where our money's going to. This has been years going on.
Yeah.
And just for instance, this is my wife speaking.
Yeah.
Where's our money going to? And I thought that this would end someday of us having to pay this on a road that should be naturally been able to drive on.
Sure. And the House made the announcement just I guess yesterday, in fact. We as legislators will now be fully able to attend these agency board and commission meetings, even if they're in executive session, which that's whenever they call for private agenda items. Even if that's the case, we as legislators will still be able to attend those meetings and ask probing questions to hold the agencies and boards and commissions accountable, which I think will be good for our state in terms of adding more transparency.
Right.
Yeah, any of that you can get done, I think the key supporters that are looking for that kind of feedback from their representatives would love it.
Yeah, that would be
It'd be all over
surely a
YouTube.
voting consideration of mine, because like I said, there's no one really attacking that or showing any concern when it comes to that. And that's one of the most talked about concerns among taxpayers, is where's our money going when it comes to that.
Well, I'm sure it'll change to the marijuana situation eventually, right? We'll be like, I thought this was supposed to go to our children.
Right, the taxes from the dispensaries or from taxing on marijuana. Is that connected to education?
No, not at the moment. Right now, they got the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority set up. So I mean, they're setting up the framework at this point. This has only been a year that the state question
It
passed.
sprang up quickly.
Well,
Yeah.
that's this conspiracy going around that all that money is going to be allocated towards education. Or that's the talk that I guess, and that's the assumption I was taking.
Right. Yeah, and, you always hear talk on
For sure,
on,
yeah.
on
Right.
the media pages.
Right.
So you gotta
This is
take
why I
it with a grain
figured
of
once
salt.
we're here, we
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
We'll let you know. Well, this is the time that we usually, like once we explain before we go to Jordy's Corner, and you have certain questions or certain ideas of what we're going to talk about, or we just opinions? Or
So I'm going to scoot up close, and then when I have to
Sure.
show it, I'll pop over there.
He was
And I'm
very
sorry for interrupting the
frustrated
format.
No, go ahead.
but-
with the Chamber of
Uh,
Commerce
so-
spelling.
So yeah, I got like I think 2 or 3 personal questions that I picked up during our conversations. So your parents came from South Korea. So you were in, I would assume, like a Korean household. Do you still celebrate any like Korean holidays? Are you still attached to that part of your culture? And if so, how much, and how has that affected like the cultural differences that you see in Oklahoma, if any?
Yeah, definitely would say that we are close to our culture and heritage. We eat Korean food, for example, regularly. I personally have been to South Korea twice to visit family over there and gotten to know more about the country's history. Hoping to go back at some point in the next few years. But yeah, definitely a big part of my identity as a Korean American.
Oh, that's interesting. Because you see people taking, no matter what the heritage, they adapt different things to their lifestyles, depending on the situation. I'm trying to remember the second thing, but I'm blanking on that now.
That's
I'm
okay.
Up here.
You remember it when you least expect
Yeah,
it.
no, exactly.
I wanted to mention how weird this whole marijuana thing has been from the get-go.
But actually, you reminded me.
See, there you go.
So right now, it's very odd. This is more political than
Yep.
personal, but and I'm hoping it changes things. Right now, if because I'm in a lot of pain all the time, I have my own medical issues. I can't get a marijuana card, a medical marijuana card, without giving up my gun rights currently in Oklahoma.
That has changed.
Really?
That has
Yeah.
changed.
Has
Yeah,
it?
we in the legislature passed a bill so that would not be the case
Oh, really?
anymore. Yes, I
That-
believe the governor had signed it already.
Okay,
but-
because I haven't heard nothing. I know we have the open carry bill coming back,
Yes.
which I'm apart from the show, so this is not official amateur in the coach. Like, I'm a personal fan of having the ability to carry and defend myself.
Mhm.
Of course, classes, education, all that stuff is
Mhm.
important. And then whenever you run into issues preventing that progress on a federal level, it just gets weird that you have to pick and choose.
Mhm.
How safe do I want to feel and how much pain do I want to be in?
Mhm.
But that's awesome. I'll have to look into that. And as for the Jordy's Corner, I was going to bring up, no matter who the guest was, I kind of get these topics and I throw them together, is recently I've seen a lot of uproar about Chinese censorship through our media, through video games, and I know you're younger than a lot of people, a lot of lawmakers or legislators or whatever. So you could identify with these issues on a different level. So I'm sure you actively maybe play video games, or at least you know about them. So I just wanted to know, how do you think this is going to affect future policies or anything? Because even a lot of senators got together to bring. They brought up Twitter evidence. It was very weird. It was dystopian to have big name politicians bring up Twitter hashtags, naming someone by their username to bash a publicly traded company for shaking hands with China. Do you think we're going to see like more of this, or?
Yeah, well, I personally won't have to see a lot of it because it's at the federal level, but I'll continue to keep track of those developments. Definitely, as far as what's happening in Hong Kong with the protesters, I would say I'm a proponent of free speech and free expression, and
Like democracy.
yeah,
It should be the
It's just-
easiest thing to ever say.
Yeah,
ever.
absolutely. Yeah,
beginning.
well,
Yeah.
when you have companies like Apple who are taking away certain apps because of the Chinese government having concerns, that does trouble me because
weird.
it sets a precedent, and you don't know what way this is going to take us.
You don't know what's lost when it's lost.
Yeah,
like that
and
could
that's
be,
the thing about censorship is you start with something small and then it gradually becomes something bigger.
Yeah.
Also,
So,
usually hitting people is bad, right?
Yeah,
Governments
pepper
with
spraying people
sticks.
is
yeah,
not good.
violence is bad. Yeah.
Yes. Well, anytime and this is just my own personal debate, when you prevent freedom of speech in any format, whether if it's peaceful protest or just writing blogs, there's a problem with that if you're denying that civil right to human beings.
Yeah.
Whether if you're in China or Oklahoma or anywhere in this country or in this world.
Well,
Yes.
Basically, that's
not everybody agrees. Not everybody's government
and this kind of
For sure.
segues into
For
another
sure.
point. Have you ever had to explain on a base level something from your generation to an older politician, mentor, that really didn't get, maybe like video game violence or cyberbullying, new types of drug use, like THC cartridges and vape pens, stuff like that? Have you ever ran into that instance?
Yeah, well, I would say that with millennials, in contrast to baby boomers, there's a lot of change in the workforce because in the baby boom generation, you had 1 or 2 jobs and you stuck with it the rest of your life. In our generation, we like to have multiple career paths to pick and choose which one's the best ones for us.
Correct, yeah.
So I think that's a little peculiar to the older folks because they're like, oh, you're switching careers all the time. And it's like, well, that's just because of the changing economy. We have more options available, and we want to figure out which ones are the best for us.
I think it's like on average, people in our generation stay at a job maybe 5 months before moving on to something better.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 6 months or a year, I thought.
Yeah, about
it's pretty
that.
I
short.
consider that still an evaluation period.
Well, especially,
Yeah,
but you're talking mostly like startup jobs, minimum wage type work, or the policies don't go well with the individual due to political differences, religious differences, whatever the case may be. Because we have like a have it your way mentality sometimes, like we live in Burger King in some ways, not all the time, but we definitely try to express our rights and freedoms and kind of push against that, which I think we see in even like the polarizing groups we have now, whether it's right-wing supporters, left-wing, whatever, we're trying to voice more than what we're normally used to.
Yeah, and with worse grammar and spelling.
Well, we got memes now. So.
Well, Representative, we got to bring this to an end.
We do?
We're gonna get you out of here,
We
and the
do.
show
Damn
has
it.
come to what we called. It's been great having you on. It's been
Thank
a
you,
real
gentlemen.
privilege.
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed it. I think that we've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and that's just like I said before. I just want Lawton community to know you on a real social basis without having a lot of. I know we spoke a lot about your agendas in politics, but I think we got to feel that you are just a Lawtonian. You do want the best for, as your parents are a part of the community, the best for Lawton and Oklahoma in general. And for that, I commend you. I commend you for all your success. I commend you for breaking the doors down, for changing the face of Oklahoma, for doing the good fight when you know that it's a hell of a struggle, a big hill to climb.
And no sleep till you're a senator.
Right.
Brooklyn.
And
That's what I was thinking of,
yeah.
A senator from Brooklyn. If whatever you need to
Lawton.
Right. So, is there anything that you want to plug in, where they can reach you, where they can find you, things that you might be having coming on, places where you might be? Now's the time, the part of the show where we allow them to be able to get a hold of you.
Well, definitely we should have Sandy send us those links and put that all in the show notes so people can click on them
Yeah, for sure.
and go to those.
Yeah, we'll have a reference to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
reference to you.
Probably the best way is just follow me on Facebook,
Okay.
like my page, and include my email address and my
Yeah,
phone
we'll
number.
get all that
Okay.
and we'll have it in the
Um,
description.
Yeah.
Yeah,
easy
they'll
to
be able
reach.
to click that little arrow
Right.
and see them all and click on them.
All right.
We'll label them and stuff.
We'll go ahead and do that. I just want to make sure they have an opportunity to get a hold of you in case they have
Absolutely.
concerns.
Mhm.
But once again, thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir.
And this is the Amateur and the Coach. We out.
Y'all know what time it is. Amateur and the cool.